Thank you for joining me on this week's episode of the Way Up Podcast with your host, Geoff Knoll. In this week's episode, I had the pleasure of interviewing Andrew Wikstrom. Andrew is an endurance athlete who participates in running and paddle sports. Andrew left his career as a sheriff's deputy in Arizona to move to Missouri and has since been able to retire and do only work that he wants to do on his own terms due to his real estate investments. This podcast is sponsored by me. I'm a real estate broker in the state of Missouri, and I believe that this message is worth my investment. Hang with us till the end. I know you won't be disappointed. Hey, I'm excited to be here this morning with my friend Andrew. We just met over the weekend at I ran a 25K, the Trail of the Four Winds at the Lake of the Ozarks. He was there. Did you compete this year in the Traverse, or were you just spectating this year?
I was just spectating this year and also helping a friend who is in the racing community. We found out he was going to be there, so we just camped out and helped him out. I ran the full Traverse last year. Yeah, so I did the 35-miler last year.
Yeah, so go ahead and talk about that just a little bit. What is that Traverse?
So it's at the Lake of the Ozarks, and the full Traverse is 16 miles around the hills on the side of Lake of the Ozarks. And then once you're finished with the 16 miles, you find yourself on a beach with your kayak, and you jump in the kayak, paddle across for a mile and a half across the Lake of the Ozarks to the other side, where you get out. And in my case, I changed my shoes because it was real muddy last year, and run another 16 miles on the other side around the hills and terrain and through rivers and so forth on the other side of the lake. And then you return to the same spot where your kayak is parked. You jump in, you paddle back across, and then run up the hill through the finish. So you end up doing a total of 35 miles if you do the full Traverse.
Yeah, that's intense. We, my brother-in-law, we both met you there. We did the 25K, the 16 miles on one side. And we talked about the last thing we could even imagine doing was hopping in a kayak and sitting still to paddle to go run another 16 miles. It was brutal. And Saturday night, I know we were both hurting a lot. Sunday was rough, but I feel good now. So yeah, it was,
yep.
It was a beating.
As with anything, in life, I've found that if you set your limit at 16, then your body and your mind will tell you, okay, I'm done, and that's all I can do. But if you set your limit a little higher, you can do a little more than that. Yeah,
I knew we could do it. I've read a lot of books. The most recent one that is about like the mindset, and then really, have you read anything from David Goggins?
No.
Okay, well he's got a few books. He was a Navy SEAL. It took him 3 times to actually become a Navy SEAL. He dropped out a few times just because he was broken. But mindset of a machine, really. He just keeps going, like hurt, not hurt, whatever. But
yep.
reading that is like, okay, well, you know what? I'm capable of doing a lot more than I actually believe I can. And he says the same thing that you did, of people have this, before they do their first 50-miler, they're like, oh my goodness, I can't even imagine doing that, until they start training for their 100-miler. He's gone on to do the Moab 240. He finished it, but he didn't get to finish because he was injured. So he went back after he got out of the hospital, went back and finished his miles. It just didn't count. But our mindset is a huge factor in what we are actually able to do, because physically our bodies will do a whole lot more than our minds will allow us.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that kind of crosses over to different things.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You're obviously an endurance athlete. You told us about, you've done the MR 340 a few times. So you're into paddling sports as well. So go in and tell a little bit about that.
When I moved to Missouri, I found out that there was a long kayak race, 340 miles on the Missouri River from one side of the state to the other. And I guess I'm crazy enough to be intrigued by that level where I did that. Once I finished the MR 340, which was my goal, it wasn't to win it, it was to finish it. I said, never again. I'm never going to do that race again. But somehow I've never had a baby, but I hear that after childbirth, at some point you forget about the pain and you remember the good stuff, end up having another child. So I went out again and ran and paddled the MR 340 a second time. Yeah, I love adventures. I love adventure racing. What ended up bringing me to Missouri was it started with a 906-mile through hike on the Pacific Crest Trail. I didn't finish the entire trail, but I finished about a third of it, or a little more than a third, between the Mexican border and Canada on a through hike, with the backpack on my back. During that trip, it kind of changed my mindset. I think that's something that we talked about a little bit, but I'll expand on. Prior to that hike, I had a ski boat, motorhome, a tractor, a house, all these material things. And I was working as a deputy sheriff in Arizona. I was happy with my life, but I had all these things kind of tied me down. I had to do all these oil changes and all these vehicles that I owned, and I was basically a slave to my possessions. Mm-hmm. When I was on the trail, on the Pacific Crest Trail, I still had all my possessions back in Arizona where I was the deputy, and my home was still there and everything. And I just kind of put all that on hold to hike the trail. But I found that I was happier with nothing but that backpack on my back. And I had shelter in the backpack, and I had food, and I had beautiful terrain all around me. And I was hiking and getting exercise and meeting goals and just having a great time. And I was out there for about 2 months doing that 906 miles, averaging maybe 22 miles a day, on average. But it really rewired my thinking of what do we need to be happy. Following the hike, I was actually done with the hike because I got what I wanted out of the hike. Basically I wanted to de-deputize myself, so I wasn't a deputy anymore, and I wanted to figure out what's next. And I thought, well, I'm pretty handy. I can maybe become a handyman. And I was making a lot of money on the side as a handyman. And I thought, well, I don't need much. And I just make a little money here and there and live life to its fullest. So I also decided I want to move from Arizona into a place where there was 4 seasons. And I wanted low cost of living, art, culture, small town. It may have been an act of God if you believe in God, but
absolutely.
About a week after getting off the trail, a buddy of mine approached me and asked if I would like to help him with a bathroom remodel in Hannibal, Missouri. I ended up agreeing to that. I said, well, I'll give you 3 weeks. We'll go out to Hannibal for 3 weeks. And I'd never been to Hannibal. I don't even know where it is on a map. The first weekend in Hannibal, I realized, wow, this is a cool little town. There's 4 seasons, there's rivers, there's lakes, there's culture, there's art. This is just what I kind of dreamt of kind of moving to, and for the next part of my life. I'm sitting down in the local coffee shop looking at the real estate ad like every good tourist should. And right in the middle of the page was a big building listed for $35,000. And I thought, wow, that's a big old building for $35,000. I wonder what that's all about. I punched in the address, and I just kind of had a day off. So I thought, well, I'll just walk up the hill and take a look at this thing. Well, I fell in love. It was like love at first sight. It was huge. It was straight. It had a brand new roof on it. And I called the realtor. I said, I'd like to take a look at the inside of this place. And she let me in, and I looked around. It was gutted. It was dirty. There was construction debris and materials everywhere. And, somebody had started a renovation, but, for some reason gave up. And I thought, wow, perfect. I've been living in a tent for the last two months. I can certainly live in this old dusty building with a roof over my head. I essentially surrendered to the fact that I can camp in this building and be more comfortable than I was on the trail hike. and I was able to endure more than your average person who needs the comforts of your typical clean house with a made up bed in the kitchen and so forth. And so I actually I bid $20,000 cash, and the previous owner of the building accepted my bid.
Wow, that's awesome.
So on the way home, I asked my friends to, I mentioned to my friend, I said, I need to get a map at the next truck stop we stopped for gas at. He said, well, I know the way home. I said, well, I need to figure out where I bought this damn building. And I need to place that in my mind, where this building is. And so for the next 7 years, and we're coming up on the 8th year now. I've been totally done for about 7 years now. I fixed up and remodeled every apartment in that building. And as I remodeled these apartments, I rented them out. I've lived in 3 of the apartments, so I built kitchens around myself and finished the remodel as I lived in it. And then I would rent the apartment that I just came from. So I just kind of played leapfrog for 3 different apartments. And in the meantime, as I'm about halfway through that main building next door came up for sale, and it was literally right next door to this building was a 4-plex, and they were offering that for $42,000. It was fully occupied. It had 4 tenants. All 4 of those apartments were run by a slumlord, and they were in bad repair, and they hadn't been maintained, properly. But I knew, based on what I was doing already, that I could fix those up also. What I was going to do is just keep the tenants in place and then fix them up as they moved out. And I wasn't going to raise the rent on them. I just kind of ride it out. And because I really, truly didn't have time to fix up the second building yet, because I was still not done with the first building.
Was it profitable as it stood where you bought it at 42 with the tenants paying what they were? Was that?
Yes, it was immediately profitable because they were paying $400 per unit.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and if you do the math on a 30-year amortization with 10, I think it's 20% down, I ended up at $200 and a penny for a payment, and
wow.
Half of one apartment paid for the whole thing.
Yeah. Wow, that's fantastic.
So, as I maneuvered through that second building, I put brand new HVAC in each apartment and hardwood flooring and the whole bit. And I probably put about $5,000 into each apartment as I went. It was definitely money that's going to come back, because now I have central AC, central heat times 4. And then in the main building, the first building that I remodeled, I have 2 large AC units, for the 6 apartments. So I pay all the utilities, but I add that to the rent. So that's a bonus there. I actually make a little profit off of that also, because everybody assumes it costs $200 a month to heat and cool a place, but it actually takes about $150 if you combine a 6-plex together like that. So
yeah, that's fantastic.
So
sharing interior walls, you probably don't lose as much heat.
Yeah, you don't.
That's awesome.
So it's a win-win. They actually save a bit on the utilities because it's paid for already. They don't have to worry about any variability in the rent and then the utility payments. They have a set payment every month.
Right.
But it was a nice evolution. And about a year after starting the project, which I cash flowed, I would work for other people for 6 to 8 hours per day, and then I would work 4 or 5 hours for myself remodeling, and I was able to cash flow the entire project. So it ended up being a very nice, just a lot of people will finance this type of project, and then they hire somebody to do the handyman work for them. And what I had was a bit of a perfect storm. One, I was able to do all the work myself, including the HVAC. And
that's a big savings.
Yeah. And then I found out that Lowe's Home Improvement, and also I'm sure other retailers, if they get a stove in, for example, that has a scratch or a dent, they sell it for about half the price.
Mm-hmm.
If they get drywall, you've been to Lowe's, and the customer who's paying full price is going to pick through the pile and take all the ones that are damaged and imperfect, and they set them aside. So what happens to all that stock? It's accumulated, and then Lowe's or Home Depot or Menards, wherever you're shopping, is going to eventually want to sell that and get rid of it. And they do it for about 25 cents on the dollar in most cases. So you can get all types of different material that's been open packaging and returned and so forth for pennies on the dollar. One of my other business plans was to purchase all of this material ahead of time before I need it. Even if I don't think I'll need it for another year, I purchase this stuff. Hot water heaters were a great thing. Because somebody will buy a hot water heater, and before they fill it with water, they turn it on. They plug it in, and it burns up the elements. Because they don't know the proper sequence and starting one up. They return it to the retailer. They say, "Hey, this hot water heater doesn't work." They get it replaced. Well, now the retailer has a hot water heater with 2 burned elements. Well, the elements cost about $20, or in this modern, since the construction materials went up, they're about $30 for a set of 2. So you can buy the hot water heater for $100, which is normally $300. Throw a $20 set of elements in it, and then all of a sudden you have $120
brand new water heater. Yeah, that's fantastic.
So every hot water heater in the building went through that gyration.
Wow.
And, almost every sheet of drywall that I purchased was purchased before I needed it. Then I just pile it up and use it as I need it. Maybe 6 months or a year later.
So it sounds like everything that you bought, you were very smart on the money that you spent putting into it. You were able to save money by doing the work yourself. And it does help having the skill to be able to do that. There's some things, I'm not going to tackle electric on, doing stuff in the panel, because that's not me. I know my limitations as far as that goes. Not saying I couldn't learn it, but it's out of my wheelhouse.
Yeah, there's YouTube videos for my friends during this entire process.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And damn near every time I wired up a 3-way switch, the switches where you turn it on and off from different sides of the room, I'd have to go to YouTube to look at the darn thing and figure out how to wire that switch each time. But you can absolutely YouTube most of this stuff.
You can YouTube through just about anything. It's amazing.
Yes.
It is amazing.
And ultimately, if you have just a basic bit of knowledge, you can expand on that through YouTube and get through a project like this. The other element of this project was very parallel to these endurance races that we're talking about. You have to learn how to suffer in order to meet your goals. And when I say that, I think the main suffering that I felt on the Pacific Crest Trail, in order to meet the goal and do the through hike, that taught me that I don't need all these things in life, and I can actually live a bit better than living in a tent and reach the goal of fixing these apartments up. I used the camp stove quite a few times. I used space heaters. I used portable air conditioning units. I used anything I could to suffer my way through this process. But now that I've reached the goal, I actually live in the largest apartment in the main building, and I have about 1,500 square feet at my disposal.
Nice.
And it's all fixed up beautifully. If somebody were to walk into the darn thing, I think they would consider it a luxury apartment. So, through my suffering and my ability to adapt to the harsh environment of living in a construction zone 3 times over, throughout the past 7 years, I was able to reach the goal. And now I don't have to work.
That is incredible. How many units are you up to? What do you have?
I'm up to 10 total, and I live in one. So
you're renting 9 of them.
Yeah.
Did you keep track? Do you know how much money you spent putting into on top of buying the buildings?
It seems like when it came to tax time, maybe
Wow.
15,000 per year.
That's killer. So now you don't have to work. Do you plan on taking on any more of these investment properties?
Well, I got together with my girlfriend about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, and by living with me and being around me, she's been inspired. She wants to do the same thing. She doesn't want to work for an employer anymore. She would like to do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, we started looking for another building, and we found a large duplex. It has 1,500 square feet per side. It's a 150-year-old building with a brand new roof, and we purchased it here recently for 32,000, I think it was.
Wow.
And we're going to do a full renovation on that, and as she works full time, we're going to work on this other building, and ultimately the goal is to get her unemployed, living like a bum, just like me.
Hey, a bum sounds pretty awesome. That sounds pretty awesome, having the freedom to be able to do the things that you want. Not that you don't want to work, but you want to work on your own terms, and you don't want to be tied down to having all of the material possessions that people are working so hard. They become slaves to a job just to continue to pay for all of this crap that really isn't making them happy. They think it is.
Yeah. So part of the process of realigning my mindset took place when I started hosting Mississippi River source to sea paddlers. As I told you, I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, and during that hike, they have what's called trail angels, and these people will host you and take you to the grocery store so you can resupply and do whatever you need to successfully finish your hike. When I moved to Hannibal, I found out they have what's called a river angel network, and there's people every year who start at the headwaters of the Mississippi River with the goal of paddling the entire length down to the Gulf of Mexico. And I thought that was the coolest thing. It's right in alignment with my through hiking that I do. And I thought, well, I could be a river angel and help these people out. So I started doing that. And the common thread that we're finding as we talk with these people, because oftentimes we're sitting having dinner at the dinner table, and talking about their philosophies and ours, and the common denominator is the fact that they're valuing experiences more than they are possessions, and that's really what I learned on the Pacific Crest Trail. But if you take that further, you set yourself up differently. You say, okay, I'm going to kind of combine that with accumulating wealth and saving just in case I live long enough to enjoy this money. So you kind of say, okay, I'm going to take these people who have dropped everything and sold everything and are entirely freeing themselves of material possessions with no emphasis on the future. I'm going to have these apartments, which is passive income, and having the passive income, I'm able to live like they are, but not like the Rockefellers. I'm not going to have a private jet. I'm not going to be rich when it comes to the mindset of most mainstream Americans with the white picket fence and the Maserati. Instead, I'll drive my BMW, which I bought for $10,000 used. I'll live in moderation. I'll spend money in a spend as if I'm poor, but live with the emphasis on experiences. I took kayaking as a hobby, but to fund that, I got in with a kayak company, and I sell kayaks to fund that hobby. Pulling a trailer with a $5,000 kayak on it, and we're headed for a paddling clinic. But we can live large without spending large. Staying out of debt is the main component of that. You don't want to pay the bank for the life that you're living. You want to pay yourself. And by staying out of debt, you can achieve that. I'm not sure where I was going with all that, but I think it's basically saying that by listening to the Mississippi River paddlers and their stories, it kind of re-emphasizes what I learned on the Pacific Crest Trail. What is important in life? What's important? Is it money and fame and fancy things and fancy vehicles, fancy clothes, or is it just, getting down to your basic kit? Because when we go kayak camping, we use the same tent, the same sleeping bag, the same stove that we cook on. As we use it both for backpacking and kayak camping. Just means you figure out what you need to maneuver through life doing wonderful things. We do a lot of traveling with little gas in the tank. You can have a heck of a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But we don't stay in hotels. We stay in tents, that sort of thing. You have to, become comfortable with not having a shower for 3 days. But heck, they do that in Europe anyhow, right?
Yeah, for fun.
Yes. And us Americans, we have to have our shower every morning. That's just pitiful. We're a bunch of consumers.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So you're headed to this paddling clinic. Are you teaching the clinic, or are you guys students in this?
I went to 2 of them last year, and so I kind of refined my paddling stroke last year quite a bit. But because my girlfriend Jackie has never been to a clinic, I signed her up, and she's going to paddle as well. So
nice. So it's a little bit product demo as well.
It's also a product demo event as well. We're going to bring several kayaks, and people can try them out. And the factory representative with Stellar Kayaks is going to actually be teaching the class.
Nice. Well, hope you guys enjoy that. I really enjoyed meeting you Saturday at the event. I'm a pretty social person. I talk to strangers all the time. I've learned that has made a lot of really good connections for me. So I just embrace the weird, and I talk to strangers pretty regular. So I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation and getting to meet your girlfriend as well. I would love to hear her story too. We've only got 2 minutes in this. Maybe another time I'll get her on the podcast as well, because she was able to get away from her job and scale back into something that she just wants to do. So, that's powerful to be able to live life the way that you want to on your terms versus doing things to pay for a bunch of crap that really doesn't make a difference.
And really, by listening to the Mississippi River paddlers, it kind of realigned her mindset, and that caused her to quit her job and go to another job that she enjoys. And that's actually going to be a good story for you.
Yeah, you've got to love what you do. We talked about it Saturday. We spend so much time at work. If you aren't happy with what you're doing, you've got to figure out a way to position yourself where you are doing something that you love, because it's too much of our time. Life is too short to spend it doing something that you don't like.
Life for me is divided up into 3 parts. 1/3 you're at work, 1/3 you're at home doing what you enjoy, and the other third you damn well better have a good mattress.
Yep. It's funny. I have a really old mattress, but it's got a memory topper, a memory foam, and I'm afraid to get a new mattress because it's pretty comfortable. So I think I'm just going to keep riding the old. It's probably 11 or 12 years old at least.
If you're comfortable, you're living large.
I'm living large. I'm very blessed. I'm happy. But Thanks for coming on the show, Andrew. I greatly appreciate you. We'll see you next time, man.
That sounds great. It was good to talk with you as well.
Yeah, boy.